Thank you very much for coming. The first order of business is to congratulate you on making it here. Thank you for joining us in our Gen Zero classroom, which we're really excited about, and we might talk a little bit more about later. We're here for a Scientist Green Career Pathways event, and we're going to hear from some scientists and innovators of green technology who are going to talk about their industry, about how they're addressing climate change, and they're also going to talk about their own education journeys to where they've come to today. We're also, equally importantly, joined by young people who are interested in green careers in the future. And we've got the Secretary of State for Education and our School Standards Minister here. And we are going to talk all together about how we can continue to strengthen and improve really good quality and flexible pathways that will help more people get skilled for green jobs in the future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and hand over to the Secretary of State for Education, Nadeem Zahawi. Nadeem.
Thank you very much, Susan, and it's great to see so many young people here today. Yesterday was an extraordinary day in many ways. As a scientist, and I'm proud to be here with so many young people who are looking to a scientific career, I hope. It was great to have the first gathering of world education and sustainability ministers at COP26. And I hope that my colleagues in Egypt for COP27 will build on what we achieved yesterday, not just those who came and engaged physically, but also many education ministers who made pledges to work together and to deliver what I think is an incredibly exciting agenda and to learn from one another. I'm excited to obviously introduce the engineers and innovators from various companies and education settings that we have, I hope, paved the way for a greener future for all of us. The Prime Minister said, as he closed the leaders' segment of COP26, that we had pulled back a couple of goals from the sort of 5-1 down at half time and might just get the dream 1.5 degrees to extra time. Well, in front of me, I see the youth squad. This is a strong bench of young stars of the future, I hope, who will score those goals and help us achieve our ambition. I think we've got a fantastic group of people here this morning, of students, and of course, we want to hear your stories, because this is as much about engaging with you as it is broadcasting to you. We want to learn and think about how others can be helped along their journey, and those green pathways that we speak about in the department. What do they look like? How do we unpack some of this stuff and make it real so that young people have real agency in how we deliver this work? It'd be really great to hear how you all got to where you are today, and about, I hope, the exciting innovation for the future, and even explain to us how all this stuff really does work and pull together. Our strategy will centre on 4 strategic aims. One, obviously, excellence in education and skills for a changing world, and very much the strategy that you will hear about that we announced yesterday has that as a priority. Net zero, 2. Resilient to climate change, 3. And the 4th is the better environment for future generations. This should, I think, put us in a really good place so that the innovation and what we do to understand how key education is part of that journey and deliver the building blocks, I hope, the foundations for a sustainable future. I'm now going to hand over to Baroness Barron, Diana Barron, who is the Minister for the School System, to, I hope, make some remarks. But I would just say, and I know I'm meeting Josh later in a bilat, which I'm really looking forward to, but listening to the young people yesterday in that coming together of all the ministers and Phoebe, who was brilliant on the main stage, and of course the questions from other young people from Nigeria and elsewhere from around the world, was truly inspiring. And I genuinely feel that there is a tipping point for this stuff, and we have hit the tipping point. And I think actually from here onwards, it's in your hands. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Secretary of State. I'm not sure I'm as tall as you. Here we go. Thank you, Secretary of State, and thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm not sure I can keep the football metaphor going, but I think the image I thought of in my mind as I was preparing my remarks is I think we're trying to build a triangle here. You can see how far I got in maths. You know, one point of the triangle is the government and everything that we have to deliver. At another point are employers. And at the top of the triangle are all of you young people who will, I hope, benefit if the other 2 points of the triangle get it right, but also to whom we must listen incredibly closely as we develop our strategies. And from our perspective in government, we are absolutely committed to offering both you as young people and you as employers the curriculum, the qualifications and the careers advice that you need to get the great green jobs of the future and to support industry in that incredibly critical transition to net zero. But I'm also super keen to hear from all the employers and potential employers here today about how we should work with you in the school system to make sure that you have pupils who are what was described to me yesterday as vocation ready. So whatever path you choose as students, whether it's apprenticeships, higher education, further education, whatever your chosen route is, that you are vocation ready. And we need to listen to employers on that. And we need to work to build on the great start made by the Green Jobs Task Force in identifying the green skills that the economy will need for the future. And obviously, innovation will be a critical part of that. And lastly, I guess my last message to all of you who've got your careers and your futures ahead of you, the thing I've picked up at this conference, listening to employers, is an incredible enthusiasm to give you a chance. I think everybody recognises the terrible time that many of you have had over the last couple of years with COVID, but there really is a sense of opportunity and a great goodwill. And as the Secretary of State says, I really hope we are at that tipping point. I believe we are, and look forward to hearing from you later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. I'm going to now hand over to our guests with the following questions, I hope, and a brief presentation on all the really brilliant work they're doing in their areas and why it is so important to all of our futures. The questions are, where did you start and how did you get to where you are? How was the company built on sustainability and climate change at its forefront? And that's really important because I said this yesterday, and I'm going to repeat it here today. Companies that look to the future will eat the companies that just look at today. And I absolutely believe that. I was an entrepreneur before entering Parliament, and I am convinced that that is the truth. what is the technology and research behind your work, and how is it helping the industry that you are in? So our first guest is Rosemary McLafferty. Rosemary, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome here. Delighted to be asked to come up and to speak to other young children and all of our amazing guests in my hometown of Glasgow. So obviously we've been lucky enough to have the COP event here, so I think everything has been going well so far. So I will just show you a couple of slides and tell you a bit about the background of myself. So I am a building services engineer. I started Glasgow Caledonian University a long time ago, and basically now I'm actually back there, so it's been a full circle, back there teaching on a kind of part-time basis. But I also now run my own company, a sustainability consultant. A bit of background there, just showing you the process really of 1998 I graduated, and 2016 I started my own company. So no matter what your dreams are, what your age is, you can do whatever you want, essentially. So I did have a great job in Tufsud in Glasgow, and we had a great opportunity to travel the world, but I felt as if that was what I wanted to do. So you gain experience as you go on, and then the world is your oyster, as they say. So basically, in 2016 I started my own company. So what we do is use the IES software most of the time, or there are other softwares obviously, but build three-dimensional models of places like this wonderful building, airports, offices, wherever, any kind of building. We can really simulate how that building is then going to operate. So I kind of specialise in sort of daylighting and sunlighting. So again, for classrooms, obviously it's a very important thing. The health and well-being of anyone, whether it's young children or adults, it's much better when there's a nice space to learn in or to work in. So that's really important. So when we have a model, we can really simulate all these different things like the sunlight. And we use climate-based daylight modelling. So wherever you are in the world, we can use climate information, and we can check how the daylight's going to be in that building. We also look at things like overheating. So again, let me just make sure I go right. Where are we here? Yeah, so we look at overheating, which I suppose is a very important thing. And again, we use future climate. So, in everywhere throughout the world, buildings are getting warmer. Maybe the ventilation's not as good, or maybe it's too noisy in the road. So we have to make sure that all these things get looked at, make sure that your space is comfortable. And then also energy efficiency. So making sure that you're meeting big building regulations, making sure that you can have the best building that you could possibly have. And obviously that's going to be resilient and last for a long time. Got some examples here of projects that we've worked on. So Scottish Parliament, so you'll see there in the larger picture is actually a three-dimensional model, which was really difficult to build at the point. And then here we've got some pictures of the actual real building. So you can see how a 3D model can actually be very representative of the real building. And you've heard digital twin, which is the word. So again, that's what we're trying to do. So I'll just show you some other pictures here. I don't want to talk for too long, obviously. Terminal 5. So again, here we've got the actual picture and then what the model is like. And that's looking at the daylighting. So we worked on that for a long, long time, and it changed all the different roof lights and how the building was actually set up. So when you have a 3D model, you can do lots of different tests and make sure that you get the best building that you possibly can. A few other ones there. It's a place in Glasgow, which is actually just in Partick, which is not far from when the actual COP event there. Student accommodation. And if you recognise this, the hydro and the armadillo. So again, everything starts somewhere. So that was a concept years ago, didn't actually exist, and that's the 3D model. So everything then had to be checked, and then obviously as it is today. So everything starts with a concept drawing, and then basically just evolves and evolves. And now things like these Gen Zero, things like that are now being put on the market essentially. That's the actual COP event there. So pictures there, and then my contact details. So I don't want to go on too long. I could talk all day about it, but basically that's the concept. So start with a 3D model, a sketch, and then eventually you'll just work and test how the building's actually going to work. Okay, so any questions like that?
Rosemary, thank you very much. So if it's all right, we'll take questions at the end.
Yeah, no
Everyone's
problem.
spoken, and we'll
No
just have that
problem.
conversation. So
Yeah.
Rosemary, thank you. And the next person who's going to speak is Mike Darby, who's the CEO of Demand Logic. So Mike, come up. Your turn to tell us your story and a bit about what you do.
Lovely. Thanks very much. It's great to meet everyone, and hopefully some of the future innovators sitting in front of us. And I'm very honoured to be here. Tell you a little bit about our story. So I don't know if anybody recognises that device. It came a bit more. Absolutely. So tragically, I suppose it came a bit more into the public eye a couple of weeks ago when the designer passed away, tragically, Sir Clive Sinclair. Really, I suppose his legacy is that he was the one who made home computing affordable. So I bought one of those. I did my paper round, worked washing up in a restaurant at the weekends, and paid 50 quid, got my Sinclair ZX81, where I started learning to program in BASIC. I do know that when I was doing that, I didn't really think that it was actually useful in any shape or form. It was just fun. I was doing it because I was a nerd, and that's the way I was developing. But interestingly, I mean, the ZX81, if this means anything to anybody, the programming space you had in there was 1K of RAM, 1K, so considerably less than a photograph. So that really was the start of me learning how to program economically, and that actually went on into my career. So I didn't have a typical education. I got a bit bored at school, and I'm somewhat ashamed to say this, and I'm certainly not advocating it. I wanted really to see why I was learning and what I could do. So I actually dropped out of school halfway through my A-levels, and I went and did an apprenticeship. Very fortunate as well, so that it turned out to be a really good apprenticeship. It's an apprenticeship in building services, like Rosemary. And the thing that I suppose I first started to grasp as I worked in environments like this was really about the scale of energy consumption. So much of this is kind of hidden away from us. It's in plant rooms where you just don't access. A boiler that size is absolutely staggering amount of energy, and they're absolutely everywhere. I was trying to get a sense of scale here. Hopefully this is going to work. So if we start talking in terms of power, there's your phone charger at 5 watts, and there's your TV at 50 watts or so. Then you start looking at things like a toaster at 800 watts. And I saw something on YouTube which really, if you want to put things into perspective, there's a man, an Olympic track cyclist who's got legs like tree trunks, somebody at the absolute peak of human strength, on a bicycle powering a dynamo, which was powering a toaster. And he, after putting in all of his effort, was unable to toast one slice of white bread. And he was absolutely exhausted. It's what we really have to grasp is that human effort compared to human demand is absolutely puny. And then if you put that in context of your boiler in a house at 25,000 watts, and then a commercial boiler at around about 800,000 watts, the scale of energy consumption is absolutely vast. So in my career, I'm old enough, I've given my age away already by showing you the ZX81, but I saw these things start to come into existence. That is part of what's called a building management system. So it was the start of buildings going digital. A building management system is a embedded computer, so it's a really clever system. It's freely programmable. It takes inputs from things like temperature, humidity, all aspects of how a building works and is monitored, and it has outputs, and the output can be turning something on or off, like a fan or a pump, or much cleverer things like regulating the flow of energy. So really exciting, and I started learning on my job how to use these. So did some vocational qualifications with some manufacturers, as well as my building services diploma, So that we would think was the problem solved, but it's not. Sorry. So these actually similar figures to the ones Rosemary was showing you. The degree of energy consumption for buildings is actually absolutely huge across the whole spectrum of human energy consumption. But really importantly, there was a study from Innovate UK, the government department, about buildings going into use. And this was one of the most painful facts, is that the average UK building going into use was actually responsible for 4 times the carbon emissions it was actually designed for. So why is that? So my own problem, my challenge, was that these systems I'm talking about, the building management systems, are generating vast amounts of data. In a commercial office, you'll be looking at tens or even hundreds of thousands of data points. And my job was to try to interpret whether the building was working properly or not. It's like simply not possible for a human to look at all of that. You actually end up working on hunches and complaints around the building. Oops. Sorry, I've gone the wrong way. So, my co-conspirators. So that's me. I'm the grubby one, the one with my arms in the ceiling trying to fix the fan core units and things. And I met up with an old friend from school, Dan, who's in the crowd with me, who's very inspirational. Dan's background is different, but overlapping. Dan was working at Friends of the Earth, working in data systems. I started talking to Dan about how much data there was in these buildings and how it was impossible to actually analyse them. And Dan introduced me to Joe. Joe's got a background in physics and journalism, so web design as well. And then we met Niels, who also has a background in embedded computing and mathematics. So we got all of these skills together. So different but overlapping skills. I mean, if we'd got 4 of me together, we would have just built the same thing that's already been built. It was really about working together, getting that combination of skills together, that we actually started to tackle the problem with our shared passion for the environment. So really, I'm going to fly through because I'm obviously waffling too much. So genuine kitchen table experiments. We got a little embedded device, low-cost PC, £100. We started programming it. We started learning to talk to these systems, so learning the languages of these systems. Fortunate enough to be able to pilot this on a few sites. We also got some grant funding from the government, our R&D grant, which actually really set us off on the right track. So now what we do, that's a picture of the walkie-talkie in central London, a massive office building with over 200,000 points on its building management system. We still use the same piece of hardware that we used for our kitchen table experiments. So we call it our DAD, data acquisition device. Very low cost, very quick to deploy, plug it into the building, one single device, streams data from all of those points across the building. We analyze it in the cloud. So much like Rosemary was talking about digital twin, like a 3D model, we create a digital twin of the building services so that all of the energy consuming parts of the building. We work out what good performance looks like and we highlight the anomalies. So where the building is not working appropriately, we flag it up, the system flags it up, and we put that into action with facilities management teams. Working with that approach is saving bucket loads of energy. We save 30% of energy consumption in a lot of buildings, but also improving the comfort and productivity of the occupants in the building and improving maintenance efficiency. So maintenance is a bit of an archaic art. You tend to, there's an old saying that it's either too early or too late. Too early because there's nothing wrong, too late because it's been wrong for too long. Data-driven maintenance really is the future. So like your car, with an engine management system, it tells you when you need to do things. So continuing the football analogy. So this is just one last example to highlight the scale of the issue. So if anybody remembers, in March 2018, I think the beast from the east, the really cold front from Siberia, it was the coldest March day in UK record. We found a single central London office building that was using 270 kilowatts of cooling on the coldest March day on record to a third of the spaces. That's the equivalent energy consumption of about 650 UK homes. And that's not the total energy consumption of the building, that's what it was wasting, clearly. And because it was cooling the space, it then used the gas equivalent of another 600 buildings to heat it back up again. So staggering levels of waste. So we've gone from being, our nerds on the kitchen table. We now got a business where we're actually, plenty of names I'm sure some you've heard of, some you won't have done, but some of the biggest property managers in the world, saving around 38,000 tonnes of carbon every year. The business is fully operational. There's 18 of us working, based in London. we're really proud of what we've done. We know we haven't finished. We're really excited about the next stage. Really, really hope that you guys get some inspiration. Go out and find the problem that you really need to solve. Stick with it. Be dedicated. Don't give up. And I wish you all of the best for your futures. Thanks very much.
Mike, that was truly brilliant. Thank you. So much there on bringing different skills together as well as how you use them to address a problem. We're going to hear next from Pedro Pina, who's from Google. Pedro, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here. My name is Pedro Pina. I'm here representing Google, and more importantly, I lead YouTube for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. This is the moment where you say, "Yoo-hoo, YouTube!" All right. Not getting that. I'm delighted to having been invited and to be here in this impressive cross-section of business and academia, and to talk about something so important. And thank you for your words as well. Regarding the importance of education as one of the key weapons we have against climate change. This is the decisive decade for action, and Google has to play a vital role. As far as we are concerned, we are already targeting to be operating at carbon-free by 2030, and we have also pledged to achieve net zero by 2030 as well. So here's some jargon that we've been, listening to for these last days, but it's important. At YouTube specifically, we've seen an increasing number of people and creators turning to YouTube to find a platform and a voice to share their anxiety and concerns about the planet and the future of climate. And that surfaces a concern that we see pretty much across the world. 72% of the global population is now officially concerned and fearful about climate change. For Generation Z, you are Generation Z, the environment is your top concern above unemployment and healthcare. And Europeans think that climate change is more important to address than COVID. So it should be no surprise to me that YouTube is wanting to share powerful stories to drive change. And these last few days, that's what we've been doing. We were at COP on the ground talking to creators, some of them carrying audiences of millions of subscribers, listening to their stories, listening to what's happening at COP26, and inviting people to, and their own audience to take action on the ground. And it's important to stress that, in my opinion, being a YouTuber, therefore, is a green job, because it is eliciting action on the ground. All you need to be a YouTuber or a YouTube creator is a passion and broadband. But thanks to our advertiser-funded revenue sharing model, we are increasingly building a small business and a vibrant creator community across the world, but also in Britain. In 2019, the Oxford Economics found that YouTube's creative ecosystem supported 30,000 full-time equivalent jobs in the UK alone. And the total contribution of YouTube alone to the creative ecosystem to the UK's GDP was $1.5 billion. So here's to green jobs. So if you're a YouTube creator telling stories about COP26 or helping just users understand what they need to do to reduce their climate emissions, that's potentially a green job, and that is great. But at Google, we want to ensure that everyone is able to benefit from the growth potential that digital provides. And we're in a long-term commitment to deliver against digital skills. And if that's okay, I just would like to just explain how that looks like. By the end of this year, our Grow with Google schemes will have supported 1 million British businesses. They would have included 10,000 hours of mentoring and trained more than 100,000 people since the start of the pandemic. We have also created a new Google Career Certificates program to enable people to gain in-demand digital skills in growing career areas around IT support, project management, and UX design and data analytics. In the UK, we're providing scholarships for over 10,000 people to take these courses for free. and it can be completed in 3 to 5 weeks full time. Typically, learners take up to 6 months to complete, and we delivered that through partnerships with the likes of DWP, Camden Council, the Princess Trust, and INCO Academy. We are also, of course, a big employer, and we are opening jobs across the country. We are proud of the significant investment in the UK digital economy, and we want those jobs to be for young people like those in the room today, the future scientists, engineers, and innovators. The digital and creative sectors are some of the fastest growing sectors in the UK, so I guess the only other thing I have to say to all the young, smart people here today is, please come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to hear from Professor Richard Betts from the University of Exeter, and Richard's a climate scientist and is head of the Climate Impacts Research in the Met Office's Hadley Centre.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak. So yeah, as you heard, I'm one of the people that have been shouting at the world for the last 50 years about all the damage that we're doing to the world's climate and the increasing level of urgency of taking action on it. So I've been here at the COP26 conference for the last week, and I'm here for the following week giving lots of talks on climate science and making sure that the negotiations there are fully informed about the strength of evidence that we have on the reality of climate change and the urgency of the problem. So I work at both the University of Exeter and the Met Office. So the Met Office you may be more familiar with as the providers of the weather forecast. We did predict this rain. We use the same data and the same computer models to look at the climate as well. So you've heard a lot about data in previous talks here. There's a vast amounts of data involved in monitoring weather and climate from all around the world, from all different sources, weather balloons, weather stations on the ground, buoys on the ocean, aircraft, all kinds of things, satellites as well. And that's continually brought in to the Met Office and other national weather services to monitor the weather and to make weather forecasts for the coming days and weeks. And then the forecasts are done with computer models on giant supercomputers, much bigger than the ZX81 you heard a few minutes ago, probably 1 billion times more powerful, maybe, I don't know. But so we bring that together, and these computer models use mathematical equations to represent the flow of the atmosphere, the role of forests in producing evaporation, the interaction with the sun, and of course the role of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide and other gases which keep the Earth warm and are actually making it warmer because we're putting more carbon into the atmosphere. So we use these giant computer models which boil these mathematical equations down into Fortran code, a very old computer language actually. A lot of computer scientists were actually quite sort of they find it quite amusing that we still use Fortran, which has been going since the 1950s and 60s, but it's still a very practical computer language for science and for collaborative work, and the collaboration is a really important part of it because our computer models are so vast. It's like 2 million lines of code. No single person knows the whole model. It's a giant piece of teamwork with dozens, even hundreds, probably thousands of people over the years who've built this thing. So the computer models bringing in the data to inform them are used to explain the causes of past climate change, and that lets us be confident, it's certain now, that we are causing the warming that we are now seeing and the increase in extreme weather and so on, and make predictions of the future about what will happen if we don't cut greenhouse gases urgently, and of course more warming, more heavy rainfall, more heat waves, more wildfires, and so we need to be thinking about obviously reducing that, but also living with some of these changes. And that's what's interesting to see around this classroom here. Actually, you've got there's the net zero ambition there about using buildings and the whole everywhere around us to reduce emissions, but also be climate resilient. So living with the changes that we've put in place already, making sure that school buildings don't overheat, for example, and they're not exposed to flooding. So a lot of my work now is actually pulling through the science into these practical decision makings, like improving school buildings and so on. So it's an incredible topic, incredible area to be working in, and I find it fascinating and also slightly terrifying, I have to say. So I'm really hoping that in the conference over the river there, over in Glasgow, we'll be making some progress. I think there's signs of it already, but we'll see. It's early days. But the question also was, how did I get to do what I do? And I do feel very privileged to work in this area. And it does go right back to my childhood. My parents inspired me to have a love of science and the natural world. My father is qualified in biochemistry, and he worked in a laboratory in a local hospital. So he sort of inspired me in science. My mother was very interested in nature and the world around us, and we'd go for walks in the countryside and along the coast and so on. So that was kind of built into me at an early age. At primary school, I was actually the weather monitor at the age of 9. So we actually had a weather station, a proper weather station, out in the garden of the school, and I spent one term doing that. So every day we'd have to go out and take all the weather measurements of temperature and the rain gauge and so on, and then write it all up in a log. So that kind of got me into weather as a child. And then through secondary school, I went to a school called the Friary School in Lichfield, a state school, which again had a very nice kind of nurturing attitude, and a very kind of an attitude of really encouraging questioning. And not just taking things as read, and I think that's really important, especially if you're becoming a scientist. And I did science A levels. I did maths, physics, chemistry, and further maths A levels. Then went on to study physics at the University of Bristol. Then I went on to do my masters in meteorology at the University of Birmingham. Then I joined the Met Office, and Met Office is one of the places where you can actually go into a research career without a PhD. And many people in that organisation do actually go through their entire career without a PhD. But actually, I decided I did want to do a PhD. So after a couple of years working in research, I did my PhD at the University of Reading in meteorology, which is a very famous department for meteorology. And that was in the role of vegetation, global vegetation in the climate system, all about feedbacks and so on, which is one of the things we're keeping a close eye on as we're changing the climate, and will more carbon come back out of the world's forests as more wildfires occur and so on. So I did my PhD whilst working at the Met Office in parallel with that, so that was quite hard doing the PhD and the day job at the same time. But yeah, I got through it, got qualified as a doctor of weather. And then I continued in my work in the Met Office. And then when the Met Office relocated across the country, we were originally in Bracknell, near London, but nearly 20 years ago we moved down to Exeter. So we were all relocated there. And as a result, the University of Exeter offered me a position as a professor there. So I now work partly as a professor in academia, and my role in the Met Office as a government scientist as well. So I'm trying to join these two areas together. And my role at the university gives me access to a wider range of experts as well, because in the Met Office we're mostly all mathematicians and physicists, which is at the heart of the climate change problem. But at the university I'm actually in a geography department, so we have people working in hydrology, landscapes, but also human geography, and bringing the human element in as well as the physical science is really crucial. And I get to supervise PhD students and master's students and so on. So I get a lot out of that in the conversations that we have with the students, new ideas coming through. So that's where I am at the moment. I still feel I'm on my journey. We're all still learning, especially in working in science. There's so much more to learn. I think if I can just finish with one piece of advice, and that is, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. If you're sat in an audience and you're thinking, oh, what's this mean? But you're too scared to ask, I bet you someone else in the audience is wondering the same thing. So ask that question, don't be scared, and get the information that you need and push forward like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and I love that picture of where being a weather monitor can take you. That's fantastic. Our last speaker today is Professor John Rowan, who's the Vice Principal for Research, Knowledge Exchange and Wider Impact at the University of Dundee. And the University of Dundee has been ranked top in the UK for climate action in the 2021 edition of the Times Higher Education
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's an absolute privilege to be with you today in this incredible facility here. It's very interesting to share a stage with so many successful entrepreneurs and business people. And actually, Richard, who you've just heard from, is a great hero of mine, because he is one of the world's leading scientists working on the complexity of climate change. So really, it's a wonderful occasion to be with you today. And interestingly, in terms of academic journeys, so I'm now incredibly old, an old professor, and have gone through that classic educational path. So my undergraduate degree was in University of Glasgow. I'm a geographer, like Richard. I did a master's in the US. I did my PhD in Exeter, where Richard is currently a professor. And then I taught at the University of Lancaster before coming to the University of Dundee about 20 years ago. So education has absolutely been my life. Probably it would be fair to say I've never quite left the ivory tower. However, it's an incredibly important part of, I think, tackling the climate emergency which we face. And so I hope to just share with you a couple of examples of things that you might consider in your own particular journeys. I will show you quite a lot of images that relate to the University of Dundee, so forgive me if you feel it's a little bit of a plug. However, I think this is really just speaking to the wider capability of the higher education system, and how it, I think, hopefully gives you an opportunity, should you choose to go down that particular route. You may choose to do apprenticeships, you may choose to go into the workforce, but if you choose to go into the university world, this may well be something that could be useful for you to consider. Are we, sorry, advancing? Perfect. Okay, so I'll just have a quick look. So I wanted to tell you something about the University of Dundee, founded in 1881. It's an institution of its city. It was very much established to be a practical institution where the concerns were trying to do good, public good. And sustainability has always been at the foundational heart of the institution, which is with its core mission to transform lives locally and globally through the creation, sharing and application of knowledge. So just to give you a couple of examples of the University of Dundee, and we're one of many research-intensive institutions across the UK. I just characterise a few badges that reflect the character of our institution. Down at the bottom right is something called the Teaching Excellence Framework. TEF, and the university was very privileged to receive a gold award for that. Up in the top left, as you look at it, is a gold watermark for public engagement, and we are the first university in Scotland to achieve that recognition for the work that we do, trying to go beyond the campus itself and work in society more broadly. The university is very strong in relation to the life sciences. I know the Secretary of State's a chemist. I think he'd be really stunned to come and spend some time with our people here. We're very strong in the biomedical space, and also have a very strong tradition of innovation that then creates wealth and creates the jobs of the future. And I like that idea you said about, if you look to the future, the companies or the organisations that look to the future will eat the organisations of today. So I'm going to take that home with me. As Secretary of State, that was very powerful. So just in terms of the way in which institutions like ours tackle the climate emergency, then, as Richard explained, there's a very strong approach to research. We are concerned with emission reductions, but increasingly also recognising that so much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have gone into the upper atmosphere that changes are already happening. And so the attention is also increasingly turning towards adaptation and to the idea, as Richard and other colleagues have mentioned, about the resilience of environmental systems and the way in which people live within those contexts. Education is a vital part of what we do. Not only are there kind of conventional degrees, but there are other new ways in which different organisations and different stakeholder groups can engage with institutions around that idea of lifelong learning. But we want to make sure that you've got the technical and the transferable skills for the job marketplace of the future, and that's very much in the areas of low carbon or zero emission energy and things like food, for example, which is absolutely central to our lives. Institutions, like all of us now, have a public body duty, and we have to make targets around net zero. So net zero is where you have no net emissions. As an organisation, government have specified that we will try and avoid net emissions beyond 2050. As you probably know, Scotland's also got a slightly earlier target of 2045, and all of our institutions are driving towards either 2050 or 2045. And then, as I mentioned, there's a very strong tradition of engagement, and it's important that we interact with the incredible businesses we heard from already today, and we work together to find out what the needs are in the workforce and what the new innovations are that will help us with tackling the wicked problems that are challenging it all around. So I'll just show you a couple of slides, and I thought this was quite a powerful example to show you, and I hope you can see this is the city of Dundee. This is the docks in Dundee. In the background of the picture you can see there's a series of oil rigs which are presently being worked upon as part of a decommissioning of the North Sea. So these heavily fossil fuel based economies are in a major mode of transition. Down in the foreground, however, you can see this incredible kind of yellow submarine type machine, and these things you can see at either side of the elongated tube are blades, and this is basically the world's most powerful tidal turbine, which has been built in Dundee. It's going up to Orkney, and it creates something like 2 megawatts of power, which is enough power for 2,000 homes. So this is almost the changing of the guard, I think you could see. So the movement away from traditional fossil fuel-based economies, particularly strong in the northeast of Scotland. And so we hope we'll see lots of jobs for those of you who are aspiring engineers. You might well see, my goodness, look what an incredible opportunity it would be to work on a system such as that. Here's another example of innovation feeding into our daily lives. This is a collaboration that's happening in a sister institution of the University of Dundee called the James Hutton Institute, which is just along the road in Invergowrie. And here there's trials around something called the Advanced Plant Growth Centre. And so these diode lights you can see are actually allowing a big tray of plants to grow. And this is a 4.5 metre tower. It has incredibly low levels of nutrient consumption, of water consumption. They're working very cleverly on the technology of the lighting. And you could imagine if a system like this tower was adjacent to your supermarket, then virtually all the soft plant needs of that supermarket could be fed off one of these towers. So 0 food miles. I mean, it's a completely incredible idea. And these could be situated and dropped down on derelict land. They could be on polluted land because they're basically a hermetically sealed bubble. And within that, you can therefore have a very strong circular economy of reusing your water, reusing your energy. So quite an incredible system. And then just to show you that there's also work that goes on abroad that takes the idea of understanding how the UK has responsibilities within the world in terms of, again, with innovation and design-led solutions to the complexities of modern life. This is an example of what's called basically an ultra-low-cost, disaster-resilient floating home. So this is a prototype house that was built on the coastal zone in Bangladesh. And the idea of this system here is that you can see these tall vertical pieces of bamboo. If there was a storm surge or the river goes in flood, basically this house lifts up out of the water. Well, lifts up and floats above. And the other thing you can see is this thing's absolutely packed with ultra-low-cost innovations. So it's got a windmill, it's got aquaponics, it's got the ability to grow food on the edge, it's got solar panels on the roof. So the important thing here is that if this house was subject to an inundation, to a tidal wave or a flood, it would float, and then the people have got several weeks of livelihood that they can exist off from the relative security of their floating home. So quite an interesting schema, and this was absolutely our privilege to be awarded the United Nations Risk Award in 2019. And then finally, I think I wanted just to leave it with you to say that we all have a role to play here. Whatever your educational pathway is going to take, and I'm a strong advocate of science, of course, but I also put a plug here for the creative industries and for legal professions and for social science, because it's actually a total systems approach that we need to take to deal with this. So I think lots of new approaches within the university sector are going for interdisciplinarity that brings the best of science with the best of social science, with the best of humanities, and we find those different perspectives working creatively together to to solve these critical problems. So that's where I would like to finish there, if I may. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'd just like to ask all our speakers to come back onto the stage, and we're just going to have a bit of Q&A and discussion. So if there are spare seats there, let's just fish them out so people can sit on them. We may be slightly short, but let's see if we can get a few seats. Just around a tiny bit, and then we can all sit in a... First question for us then. This is the moment for taking the invitation to be brave. Thank you. Congratulations. You are extremely brave.
There you go. All right, thank you. My name is Sana and I'm one of the youth representatives for the UK. I was just wondering, there's been a lot of talk from all of you about how there's going to be lots of jobs in the green industry in the future. Could you expand a bit more on what actual steps we're going to take to encourage young people to actually take up those jobs?
Actually, we could just pass this around.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Everyone likes it?
Who wants to take that one first?
Happy to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. First.
I mean, I think in terms of encouraging you to take up green jobs, it's really, I think one of the slides I showed about the waste in that building that was about 500 UK homes, I didn't really say it at the time, but I really hope it left you with a sense of outrage, and really you are going to inherit the planet as future generations have left it for you. It's going to be really, to encourage you in, I think it's going to really be about thinking, what can I do as part of everyone's future, really? I think it's as simple as that. And in terms of the opportunities, if you take our little company, there's loads. It's whether if you're an engineer, software developer, if you just want to go into sales, all of these things are needed in all companies, whatever they're doing. But do just think about the ethos of the company that you're going to. Simple as that, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But what I would say is be critical of the companies where you are checking the jobs for. If the companies are serious about becoming carbon neutral and working on net zero, those jobs will be green jobs. So I think we should be careful about distinguishing green jobs and no green jobs. The only jobs in the future have to be green jobs. And you own the power of the market. You have the power to choose where you want to put your talent. Put your talent on the companies that make the right commitments. If you feel that they're greenwashing or if you feel that they're not doing the right thing, just choose another company. And your job by definition will be a green job.
Thank you. Very useful advice.
To pass the microphone down to Vincent. Thank you very much.
I was just going to say, I think part of your question was about the route and how do you find the route? And obviously the government's working really hard. We're passing legislation at the moment which will increase the number of times that particularly further education providers have to go into schools and talk about a whole range of careers. So it's not kind of university or nothing, but there's a whole bunch of other careers because, as we know, there are lots of skills gaps in the economy at sub-degree level, if I can describe it like that. There's also the Careers and Enterprise Hub, which will be striving to give great advice to students still at school. But certainly one of the things that I've picked up is it's also when employers go into schools and paint the pictures like we heard this morning that you kind of think, oh, that could be me. So we've all got a big part to play.
Thank you very much indeed. Who else has got a question? Yes, thank you.
So my name's James. I'm in my final year of high school, and I'm really focusing on this the plant invention about the food waste. And I was wondering, what are some of the drawbacks to this invention, and when has it been looking to be implemented?
Thank you. That was a great question. I mean, I think it's one of multiple prototypes that exist. It's not unique to our collaboration in Tayside. So there are many schemes equivalent around the world. And part of what they're doing is looking at the feasibility of and the whole kind of life cycle analysis of what does it mean in terms of installation of one of these machines. So we could call it a machine, but basically it's a machine that produces food with a minimum environmental footprint. And therefore there's lots of calculations that go into it around where does all the bits and bobs that go into the supply chain come from, and where are the bits of embedded carbon within those. And then you go through that sort of analysis that says, well, we can produce this food and it has this kind of greenhouse gas footprint, and therefore that is a contribution to, you know, the reducing emissions and controlling and managing the carbon footprint and the wider environmental footprint of society. But of course, that's on the supply side. One of the things we have to think about is also about the demand side. So are we consuming too much? Are we consuming too much of the wrong stuff? And therefore that's part and parcel of this whole broader mix. But this particular innovation that's associated with James Hutton and the university is a really interesting collaboration between a private organisation and a public body research institution. And I think that's some of the exciting things where the future will happen about bringing innovation together with education. And there will be opportunities within those sorts of companies for students to come in and do internships, to come and visit the facilities, to understand whether that's the thing that excites you and you would like to do something with it. So I hope that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Who's next? Any questions or anything you want to tell the panel about how that was for you or how it felt? Yes, right at the back. That's all right. You can talk anyway. Wait for the mic, though, because otherwise the people on the webcast won't be able to hear you.
Thank you. I'm not a young person, but could I ask the panel, if you could give your 16-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be? That's for everybody.
Superb question. You've got the length of time it takes for the microphone to be brought back here to figure out the answer to that one.
Let's go and kick off.
Shall we start that? I was going to say we started and just walk back.
Okay, fine.
Well, I'll keep it super brief to allow others to speak, but I just think try and follow your heart, your passion, try and follow your instinct, and I think generally that will serve you well. I think we all take different pathways. Some of us will have false starts. That's okay. Just try and maintain your confidence and your commitment, and I'm sure you'll get where you want to be in the end. So thank you.
I think mine would be similar, but I think a key thing would be don't be complacent. Don't think that something is solved because it should be. I think that's what I personally spent too long finding out. I think, I should have found out a lot faster that there were really hard, challenges that needed solving. Don't assume that it's done. Just because you're young, you might think that the world knows all about the solution. It doesn't.
I spend a lot of time with YouTube creators every day. So I spend a lot of time with those 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds, and I'm always humbled by the sense of agency and power they believe they have because they have a voice. So when I was that age, I did not have that voice and I did not have that sense of power. So what I would say to them is, yes, you do. Please use your agency, use your power, use your voice, because you can have a higher impact. I was busy thinking about all the wrong things when I was 16 years old. I really mean it, and I've been humbled by this generation and how active it is. So you have power, you have a voice, use it.
So I would say be flexible and follow what you love doing and what motivates you, and be prepared to change plans if things don't work out. I mean, the job I do, and probably many of us on this panel, didn't really exist when I was 16, actually. You can't really predict where you're going to be in the long term. So get your general direction, but then work within that and be prepared to change and do what's fun.
Yeah, I would say similar. I think just, be confident in yourself, because you are amazing, and never think that someone else is better, or, you should always think that you are amazing, because you will do something that everyone will really appreciate. And, I go in to speak to schools as a STEM ambassador, and there's lots of opportunities that probably don't necessarily exist just now, but you could potentially create. So I think just always have confidence in yourself, and everyone together will make a change for the better.
Slightly nerve-wracking being at the end of the line. Someone's going to steal your idea before. So I suppose what I would say is be curious. And I think for so many of us, the careers we're most familiar with are our parents' careers. And as you mentioned, many of the careers that you're going to have don't exist today, and your parents won't have done them. And I think looking beyond what's familiar and close to you and being curious will stand you in good stead.
It's a great question. I went back to my old college, UCL, not when I was made a politician, but when I was an entrepreneur, and spoke to some of they had a program with Stanford on graduates who were looking to start up their own businesses. And I opened my speech by saying, be passionate, because actually success is linked to that passion. Whether it's Steve Jobs or Sergey and Larry, they didn't set up companies because they wanted to make money. There is no correlation between your desire to make money and actually success. There is a great correlation between you being passionate and success. So try and try again. Don't be afraid of failure. I think culturally, in many ways, one thing I admire about the United States of America is they celebrate failure. And indeed, Singapore do as well. I think they've got something called the Phoenix Prize in Singapore for entrepreneurs who've tried and failed and come back again. So don't be afraid of failure, and go for it. There's never been, I think, a better time if I was 16 now, I would absolutely be trying lots of different things. And if you don't have a passion yet, because some of you be thinking, well, I'm not sure, try lots of different things.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, if there are no more questions, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. I'm going to ask that we show some appreciation for each other for this fantastic panel that we've assembled, and so thank you to Secretary of State and Minister. Thank you very much. Be curious, follow your dreams.